So welcome to another edition of the Trucking on Route 66 in Missouri Oral History Project, a collaborative initiative between Missouri State University Libraries and OzarksAlive.com. I'm Tom Peters, Dean of Library Services at Missouri State University. My colleague on this oral history project is Caitlin McConnell from OzarksAlive.com. This project is made possible in part by a grant from the Route 66 Corridor Preservation Program of the National Park Service. Today's date is Friday, February 9th, 2018. My special guest today is Larry Posey, and we're interviewing him in his office at Nixa Trucking near Springfield, Missouri. Larry, thanks very much for allowing us to interview you this afternoon.
My pleasure.
So let's start with that. Let's start with a difficult question. Where and when were you born?
1942 in Oakland, California.
Oh.
My folks were from Oklahoma. The Dust Bowl blew them away. They moved to California, stayed there a while. My folks worked in the shipyards at Richmond, California for the Kaiser Shipbuilding Company in World War II. I was born there, and then as soon as they could, they moved. As soon as the dust settled, no pun intended, they moved back to Oklahoma.
All right.
And been in the country ever since.
Where in Oklahoma?
They were anywhere from Pitcher all the way down to Colgate, which is clear to the other end of the state, all up and down that stretch.
Okay. So what brought you to Springfield?
What brought me to Springfield was Camel 66 transferred me in here in 1978.
All right.
I started out with them in 1963, as a billing clerk, typing freight bills on the 3 to 11:30 shift in Joplin, Missouri, typing them on a old electric, it was modern at the time, IBM Selectric with the little cartridge ball, and you typed it and you made 8 carbon copies.
Wow.
And there was fingers, and you had to slide them just exactly right and then tear the bill off and start all over.
So you're making 8 copies every time you typed?
On carbon paper.
Yeah.
And that was, to say the least, that was an experience all its own.
So
when you
born
had
in
to
42
change the carbon.
So you were 21 years old?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very young.
Yeah. And you stayed with the company?
I left the company in 1985.
Okay.
But Camel 66 was unbelievably efficient. When I started, everything was, this is the way you do this and this is the way you do that, even down to the billing clerks. So I took the tests and got into operations. Got transferred to Kansas City. I worked in Joplin, transferred to Kansas City, sent to Omaha, Nebraska in '76 to open a terminal where there wasn't one.
I was going to say, I didn't recall that they had a terminal, but they did eventually, huh?
Yes, in '76.
Right.
Did a good enough job. I was there 2 years that they transferred me to Springfield. I was promoted and became a regional manager. And after that, in '83, I believe it was '83, I was promoted to Vice President of Marketing.
All right.
And that's kind of the way it is. Mr. Campbell was kind of funny. He liked to promote people from within. He was very, very big on that. He certainly felt like that if there was a better deal, he wanted somebody he knew to have it, somebody that had proven themselves already. But that seems to be a different way of doing things today, but that's the way he did it.
So you rose all the way to vice president
from billing clerk.
From billing clerk.
On the night shift. Yeah. But I was single at the time, and getting off at 11:30 in the evening and not having to go back to work till 3 o'clock the next afternoon was pretty good.
It was okay.
It was pretty good.
So you were telling me earlier that, let me back up and say, in '84, you tried to document summarize the history of Campbell 66 Express. And also, because you were VP of marketing, to kind of also summarize what Campbell 66 Express could do for its customers and for its potential customers.
Right.
And that's what's in front of you right there.
Yes.
Is the original.
That is, the black tape is because when I got it out of the attic Wednesday, I believe, it fell apart. This was put together in 84.
All right. And you did that.
I was instrumental. I had a lot of help from a lot of the folks because it took everybody to do this because there wasn't anyone that knew everything that this thing covered, so you had to get help from every department.
Yeah.
But the sales and marketing department are the ones who did assemble it in its form, and it was constructed very simply. A feature, benefit, and proof situation, like we discussed a moment ago. One of the features of Camel 66 at the time was it had protective service. Keep your stuff from freezing. Okay, that's great if you're Sherwin-Williams and are shipping latex paint. That doesn't mean anything to you if you're shipping nuts and bolts, how cold it is.
Right.
So we had to make our features mean something to the guy shipping the freight.
Yeah.
And that's what this tried to do, and you're going to digitize it, and it's all put together. And the first thing in it was the chronological history of Camel 66 by decade.
Yeah.
And we felt like that was very, very, very important back then is, who are you? What were you? How'd you get to where you are? And what are you going to be tomorrow? Back then, there wasn't as many truck lines as there are now. Back then, from 1935 until 1980, you had to have authority, specific point-to-point, by highway, authority to serve everything.
And that's from the federal government.
That's the Interstate Commerce Commission. It's called a Certificate of Authority.
From 35 to 80 was sort of the years of regulation.
Total regulation.
Yeah.
You had to go, let's say, I remember this, Camel 66 went to Tulsa. They didn't go to Oklahoma City.
Because you didn't have authority.
Right.
Yeah.
And at one that I was involved in, we went to Omaha. I opened the terminal. There was a ton of freight down at Lincoln, 67 miles away. We couldn't go there because we didn't have authority.
Yeah.
So Mr. Campbell came up, a company called Beeline in Omaha, Nebraska, had 2 sets of authority from Omaha to Lincoln. And we bought one of them. I was there. I was right there when it happened. Mr. Campbell negotiated a price. We bought it. And once you buy it, doesn't mean you have it. You have to have P, C, and N at that time. Public conveyance and necessity. In other words, we want to go to Lincoln. Well, congratulations. You had to be able to prove at a hearing before a federal, he wasn't a real live judge, he was right below that kind of a referee or something like that. So administrative, I don't know what it was, but he worked for the ICC.
Yeah.
And you had to go in there and prove, okay, we buy Lincoln, Nebraska. First of all, is the service needed?
Yeah.
Second of all, will anybody use it?
Yeah.
And third of all, if you get it, can you make money doing it?
Yeah,
Can you turn a profit?
Do you have the capacity to serve this route?
That's right. So you had to produce witnesses at a hearing and documentation that yes, this service was needed. Yes, Bob Smith at Brand X Company, Brand X Widget Company will ship by you. And then you have your CFO, and I remember our comptroller at the time was named Bill Burbrick. He would pull his hair out because he had to do projections on a P&L to show, yes, if we get this, it'll bring in this much money and we'll make this much money.
Wow.
And after some of those, sometimes he'd have a strong drink. But you had public conveyance and necessity. Or public conveyance and necessity. In other words, you were a public utility.
Yeah.
That's exactly what a truck line was up until July of 1980.
And that's the infamous deregulation.
That was the infamous deregulation.
Yeah. And
Then,
suddenly any trucking line, anybody with a truck could haul anything from one to
you don't even have to have a truck nowadays. You can get a broker's license. But then you had financially, then a truck line's authority was generally a third of its net worth.
Really?
After July 1st of 1980, that was valued then at $350 instead of $20 million.
Yeah.
And I don't remember all the specifics, but you could look. The IRS allowed the carriers to write off the value of their authority for a period of years, and I don't know all the gory details on that.
Yeah, I'm sure there was a big fight over, deregulation.
Oh,
advocates for
it took them 4 years to cram it through Congress.
Yeah.
But before 1980, I had to prove that if I went to Kansas City, for example, people needed the service, people would use the service, and I could turn a profit with it. Public conveyance and necessity.
Right.
Now, all I have to prove is that I've got $350, a certificate of insurance from a motor carrier, a process agent, and I got authority in all 48 states.
What's a process agent do?
When people sue you, no matter what state they're in, you have to have a process agent where they can serve the papers on them.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Evidently, a lot of people get sued these days. I don't know, but that's the difference. Then your authority meant something. Now it means you got an insurance carrier. You got $350, and you got a process agent.
Yeah.
Basically, and that's a little abrupt and a little harsh, but that's the way it is.
Yeah. Okay, so you weren't alive back in that, but from 26 to 35 was wild and woolly?
It was like the Wild West.
Yeah.
And we so address that here in the chronological thing that you're going to document. Mr. Campbell told me we were getting ready or just finished playing golf. And I was asking him what it was like before 1935. And he said it was like the Wild West. Mm-hmm. You call, we haul. If you had one of his customers was Kraft here in Springfield, I believe, and he went to hauled freight to Cincinnati for him. If you had freight and I had a truck and we agreed on the price, we was in business.
Yeah.
That got a little woolly. And one of the reasons the Interstate Commerce Commission did the Motor Carrier Act was to prevent discriminatory procedures against shippers. Okay, let me give you an example. I go to Kansas City. You make shoes, he makes shoes. You both ship to Kansas City. I charge you $500 because you're my friend. I charge him $700 because I don't like him.
Yeah. Or I want your business, so I'll give you a good deal.
Yes.
I don't really care about his
or
business.
I'm predatory, and I'm gonna charge you $5, but because he's a new guy and I'm wanting him, I'm gonna charge him $350.
Exactly.
So, what the Motor Carrier Act of 1935, it was passed in 35 and 36, and if memory serves, it was implemented in 38.
Okay.
But what it did, it set up routes, step one. You got to have specific authority. Now, Mr. Campbell told me there was a grandfather provision. from between while this was going on. If you could produce a freight bill, a bill of lading, that you had hauled freight from point A to point B, you could grandfather that authority into the Motor Carrier Act of 1936, 38.
Yeah, okay.
So he went to Cincinnati, and he told me this out of his own mouth. And he said, we started this stuff, and anywhere I had a freight bill to, I could get authority.
Just one load.
One load, grandfathered. He said, hell, I didn't want to go to Cincinnati anymore, so I didn't turn it in.
Oh, I see. So you guys,
You could pick
you
and
choose what,
and that's
what you
how
saw as the lucrative
he
routes.
ended up down 66 Highway.
So 66 was one of the originally authorized routes
Oh, yes.
for,
Camel 66.
and it was just Campbell Truck Line at this point. When did they buy 66 Express?
They didn't buy it. They named it in the 30s, I believe,
All right,
when they put the 66 on it.
all right,
And before that, it was Camel Fuel and Transfer
all right.
of Springfield, Missouri.
Okay,
But now, what went along with the Motor Carrier Act was the establishment of tariff bureaus. Basically a copy of what the railroads had, since the Railway Act of 1880, something like that. I don't remember that. But we're talking about this 1,000 pounds of shoes going from here to Kansas City for you and Bob Smith over here. They established tariffs that set prices. If you ship 500 pounds of shoes to Kansas City, it's $300. If he ships 500 pounds of shoes to Kansas City, it's $300. The price was the same. And that was one of the reasons for, as I understand it, for the Railway Act and the Motor Carrier Act was discriminatory treatment.
yeah,
The truck lines could just put you out of business.
yeah. If they didn't
And
like you, or you know,
if they did. But see, that's why it came to PC&N, public conveyance and necessity. Did you need my service to Kansas City? Would you use it to Kansas City?
yeah.
And there we are.
And then you didn't have 1,000 trucking firms trying to fight for the business.
That's exactly right. Now you've got, I think, don't make me sign this in blood, but somewhere I can get it, maybe from Transport Topics, the top 100 carriers in 1968. They put out a list every year of the top 100 by size.
And I remember when I was a kid, PIE, I'd see a lot of PIE trucks.
Pacific Intermountain Express.
Yeah.
They were huge.
Yeah.
They were in the top 5.
Yeah.
But at one time, I believe Camel 66 was number 18 or 19 or 20 on profitability.
Really?
Right
That's kind of
in
the
there.
highest that they rose was to top 20?
Yeah, that's it. That's about as, we didn't go coast to coast.
Yeah.
And second of all, he didn't have the authority, and third of all, he didn't want to.
Yeah.
he wanted to do what he did well. And back then, every carrier had a niche.
Yeah.
They did something.
Yeah.
Camel 66 went down 66 Highway. Chief Freight Lines in Kansas City. Kansas City, Tulsa, Oak City, Dallas, right down 69 Highway.
Yeah.
And they did that. PIE, Pacific Intermountain Express, went west. Then they went coast to coast. But everybody had a niche.
Yeah.
They did something that they did well. And if I tried to intrude in your playhouse,
Yeah.
you could protest if
To
I
the
brought
ICC?
yeah,
Just say
and
that.
boy, then the fight was on. Some of those things would last 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
So it was a very vicious circle. But the beneficiary, quite honestly, was the shipping and receiving public.
Yeah.
They knew what their freight was going to charge them. They knew that the carrier had to have something going for them, or they couldn't get authority.
Yeah.
And now, you don't know what. A lot of times, you don't know what you're getting.
Yeah. Now, was another part of it the type of stuff that you hauled, whether you had a reefer truck or flatbed or so you would specialize in
Yes.
a certain type. Was Campbell Didn't do much flatbed stuff?
None.
None.
We did no flatbed. We had a few reefers, refrigerated trailers. We had a few what was called open tops. That's a regular trailer. It's got a tarp on the top.
Yep.
And the pups and
And a pup again is a tandem trailer.
A short, a multiple trailer combination.
Yeah.
And that was all we really did.
Yeah.
I mean, most everything, we didn't haul flatbeds, huge machinery or anything like that.
Oversized loads.
No, I don't ever remember any of that.
Yeah.
We hauled general commodities, what we call box freight.
Yeah.
Down 66 highway, and at that time we went from on 66 from Chicago down to Oklahoma City.
All right, so I'm still learning. I'm on the steep curve of the learning, steep slope of the learning curve here. But back in the day, were loads hand loaded? They weren't palletized.
There was most of the freight back when I went to work in 63. I would say well over. And some of the old timers may have a better grip on this than me, but I'd say 60 to 80% of the freight was, maybe more, was hand freight.
Wow. 60 to 80%.
Yes, because
so you would have a crew that would load a truck.
Yes, yes, and that's what I was going to tell you. In Joplin, when I started, you had a crew that when the trucks would come in from St. Louis and Kansas City, which was very important. They were our overnight service lanes into Joplin, the consuming area from Kansas City and St. Louis, the supplying area. We had to get those things in there, and they got in there 4, 5, 6 in the morning, get that freight off and get it out to deliver, because people depended on that overnight service on LTL, less than truckload.
Yeah.
Okay? So you'd have a checker, a dock man, and a loader. The checker is the one that counted, looked at the bill, 10 pieces from Townley Metal to Pearl Brothers Hardware in Joplin, Missouri. 10 pieces. There they are. Put them on a cart. The dock man would push them to the other side to the loader, who would put them on, route them, and put them on the city delivery truck.
Yeah, and I used to work in a food wholesale where you'd load in reverse, so that if you did it right, well, this is a straight truck, but your first stop is right on the back.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
As you unload, then
yes, that's what we would do.
Yeah.
That's what we tried to do, and that was the purpose of the multiple trailers. The smaller trailers, the object was to load them in Kansas City. I use that as an example. When they got to Joplin, you didn't have to do anything because it was a short trailer, except put a city tractor under it and go out and deliver it.
Yeah.
Well, who was the best laid plans of mice and men? They don't work. And Camel made another experiment. It was called the Camel Pouch. It was a regular 40-foot trailer, but right behind the dollies, the duals of the tractor and the trailer dollies, it came down.
Oh yeah.
And
back up. Yeah.
And back up, and it was the belly.
Yeah.
And it was called the Camel Pouch on the side of the trailers.
Yeah.
I don't have a picture of one of those anywhere I looked, but the object is, back then, Kansas City to St. Louis. Kansas City and St. Louis, and I used Joplin because I coded all the bills there at one time. You would have a trailer come in from Kansas City with 90 shipments on it.
Yeah.
Because UPS wasn't in business.
Right.
FedEx wasn't in business. The only competition you had for small packages was REA, Railway Express Agency. So the purpose of those Camel Pouches, they had doors.
Oh, on the yeah.
And you put freight in there and close them down. Well, again, back to the best laid plans of mice and men, they were not very successful. And I'm being very generous, very successful. I wrestled those things around at 2 below zero, so I have my own opinion. But we tried innovation in a lot of things without forsaking what we did.
Yeah. And Campbell was known for being innovative. Right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Well, right here, this is 1983 brochure, or 1984 brochure. This is when we provided computerized tracing.
Oh, yeah.
And we called it Camel Tracks. We can track your shipment. And I want you to have this so you can digitize it too. But this is in the 80s.
Yeah.
And we were innovative enough to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And that was very important.
That was a big deal.
Where it was particularly important was assembly line people. J.I. Case in Wichita, Kansas. General Motors in facilities. In Oklahoma City, in Oshawa, Ontario, and St. Louis.
Yeah.
They could punch this up on their computer, and it didn't have fancy screens. It printed out on old-fashioned
Green bar paper.
That's it. That's it. And it would give you a listing of every shipment that was in our system destined to you, where it was and when the ETA was.
Yeah.
And we did that in the 80s.
And this was just kind of the beginning of just-in-time delivery, and don't warehouse a lot of stuff and get those parts in there just when you
That's
need them.
exactly right. And General Motors went into that. General Motors was one of our largest customers at Camel 66 in the 80s. Matter of fact, at one time it was the largest. And we hauled vendor freight from all of these places. When we started with them, and I was one of the ones that got us started with them, they had generally 6 weeks, 3 to 6 weeks of supplies that if nothing happened, they could keep building cars. After they went to JIT, which was not a freight and traffic department function, it was financial. You're building a car a minute, you've got 6 weeks of inventory. The accountant said, I wonder how much that costs us a day to keep that sitting here.
Yeah.
So they pulled that back. It's 12 hours.
You want a rapid turnover. Get the part in, get it
assembled
and out the door.
It was really simple, just in time.
Yep.
If you weren't there when you were supposed to be and that plant shut down, they just sent you a bill for it. And
it was in the contract. They had to shut down because we don't have the part.
It was really tough.
Yeah.
But you know what? It was risk versus reward, and you got paid a lot more for that than you did hauling Van Camp's pork and beans into a grocery store. So it was all risk reward.
Yeah.
Innovation, you're right. We did a little bit of everything.
A couple things back to the early days, 26 to 35. The railroads weren't real keen about the rise of commercial trucking.
Not at all.
Yeah.
However, they all started truck lines of their own.
So they kind of wised up.
They started them right away.
Yeah.
What the ICC did was they granted this authority, and they told the railroads, you can run trucks also wherever you've got authority. So, KCS, it was Santa Fe. Santa Fe started a truck line that ran parallel to the railroad.
In the 20s?
No, that was in the 30s. 30s and 40s when they started. Frisco had a truck line that paralleled the railroad.
Yeah.
That was the old Frisco. MOP, Missouri Pacific, they had a truck line that paralleled the railroad. And one of the reasons they did that, railroads used to haul LCL, less than carload. Railroads didn't want to haul two things, people and LCL. They wanted a boxcar full of freight.
Yeah.
So one of the things that the truck lines did was say, hey, we'll take care of your LCL, LTL.
Yeah.
The railroads don't want it.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
And
So less than load.
less than
It was faster. I've
LCL
heard people say,
was less than carload.
yeah, if you want to get something from Kansas City down here quickly, the
Use
truck
truck.
was much
Oh
better.
yeah.
And then also, rail lines only go so far. I mean, there's only so many rail lines. But if you need to get something into a place, a warehouse, or whatever, that doesn't have a rail siding,
Yeah.
a truck will get you
Yeah,
there.
most places didn't have rail sidings into their thing,
Yeah.
and you had to go get a car, put somewhere, and load it, and it was a
Yeah.
pain in the tush.
Yeah.
But the Motor Carrier Act, and then what happened? The railroad started losing customers. So they said, wait a minute, we're going to start truck lines of our own. And they did. The biggest operation in Kansas City, Missouri, the biggest trucking operation was Santa Fe Railroad. I mean, it really was. And Missouri Pacific had a big operation up there. So then they got into it because they didn't want 10,000 pounds. No, they wanted a whole box carload.
Yeah.
That's
Which is a
what-
lot. I've unloaded a boxcar.
I have too.
There's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah. But that's kind of where it was, and that happened. And then Camel 66 purchased, and you're going to have to give me a year or two either way on this, got into Pittsburgh, Kansas, Parsons, Kansas, Coffeyville, Kansas, Tulsa, by buying and back into Joplin, a company called Sunflower. And they went to Joplin, and Camel went down there, and that's where they tagged up. You had to be able to tack your authorities somewhere.
Yeah. So you always kind of looking what's going to get you.
Yeah.
So from 35 to 80, the way a trucking company grew was by acquiring other companies.
Or
And acquiring the rights to petition the ICC to haul freight.
yes,
From
you had to buy authority. And I'll give you some some things that we bought in '54, and don't make me sign 54 in blood, but it was a year or two either way.
mid-50s.
Camel 66 bought Highway Express. That got them into Mississippi, Louisiana, Tennessee. Let's see, where was that? Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee.
All the way
That
down
got
to the
in
Gulf?
the South.
All the way down to the Gulf.
Yes, yeah, that got them in those states.
Now, was container port business a big part of trucking back
It
then?
wasn't a big deal with Camel 66. There was some carriers, Specialized, that made a lot of business or made a lot of money hauling containers.
Yeah.
That wasn't our bailiwick. We just didn't do it. And that's how Camel got into the South, was with that. And then in 1975, they bought TransAmerican Lines, which got them into Omaha. They tacked at Kansas City. The authority tacked at Kansas City. Omaha, Des Moines, Minneapolis,
No, so upper Midwest.
Indianapolis, Columbus, Louisville, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and Buffalo. And that was that. And the only way we could do that was by that authority.
Yeah.
Now, the other carriers protested. I went to those hearings several times. They lasted 6 weeks
Yeah.
or more. I mean, just tooth and nail.
You
And
mean like with daily testimony?
Yes.
Almost like a court trial.
yes, it was just like a court trial, except there was a little foul language among the truckers. But that's where all that came about.
So it was still, even during the days of regulation, it was contentious and rough and tumble.
Yes, it was, and it really got contentious if I tried to take your cookie.
Yeah.
If you're
Kind of a zero-sum game. I mean, there's only so much traffic, and
there, listen, that is what I wanted to say, and thank you. at one time, Kansas City to Dallas. Basically, there's only so many shipments moving every day from Kansas City to Dallas.
Yeah.
Now, the big players then was Chief, TOX, Texas Oklahoma Express, Camel 66, and Red Bull. Mm-hmm. Now, we fought tooth and toenail over those 100 shipments, let's say, or 200. Every day from Kansas City to Dallas. And when you tried to take my cookie, we got very unhappy with each other.
Because there's only so many cookies in the jar.
Because, see, remember what I told you about tariffs? Everybody's price was the same.
Yeah.
Kansas City to Dallas, you ship 500 pounds of nuts and bolts, cost you $100.
Yeah.
Cost you $100 from everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody's same deal. Anybody that was going to be a player in that game gave overnight service. Pick it up today, deliver it tomorrow. Now, if you didn't do that, you don't even come to the game.
Right.
So the rest of it.
So it's partly service. So let me ask you another question, just trying to understand this. So why did Frank get into wasn't he hauling stuff locally, coal or something?
Yeah, cinders and coal, Camel Fuel and Transfer.
That's how it got started.
And
it was
here.
local.
Yeah.
So if you were a homeowner and you needed
and he'd bring you coal and take the cinders away. I mean, that's...
So it never ran empty, huh?
Yeah.
Would you pay to have the cinders taken away, or was it just built into the price of a bunch
I don't know. I never talked to him about the coal and cinder industry, but I talked to him a lot about...
But that's how he got started.
Yes.
And that leads to my question, what was, Campbell was still doing local stuff up until the end, right?
Yeah, we still go from here to Mount Vernon.
What was the lucrative?
We had a lot of local authority.
Yeah. Lebanon.
Blue Eye, Branson, all Lampe, all down through there. Yeah. And we gave it away, I think, that authority to Southern Missouri Express way back when. So we didn't have to do it.
It wasn't lucrative?
Yes. Yeah. If you had authority, and here was the kicker, if you had authority, you had to service it, or you could be in a show cause situation.
Yeah,
you had to show cause why we should not take your authority away from you.
Yeah.
But if it was just like, truck lines were a utility.
Yeah.
It was just like city utilities.
Yeah.
You got to furnish me electricity if I pay my bill.
Yeah.
If you're in Blue Eye, Missouri, and you got 27 pounds going to Lebanon, Missouri, and I tell you I don't want to haul it, I'm in trouble back then.
Yeah.
Now, go jump in the river.
Yeah. Sue me.
Yeah. Congratulations.
What kind of a man was Frank Campbell?
Oh. What kind of a gentleman was Frank? I guess his greatest vice was golf. He loved to play golf. He came up hard. He was self-made.
Where did he grow up?
Right around here, I think. Uh-huh. He was self-made. And a couple of things he didn't like. He didn't like people that smoked a pipe in the office.
Just pipes, not cigarettes, or
a pipe. Yeah. He told me once. He said to spend all their time working on their pipe. he didn't like people that felt like they were really high rollers. He was just common. If you talked to him, you wouldn't know he had two nickels to rub together. Yeah. He was unpretentious. He didn't flaunt his wealth. But he liked his guys. Every year he would take a bunch of us to Colorado Springs. He had a home out there on the Kissin' Camels golf course. He didn't own it. There's two rocks. It's called Kissin' Camels. And there's
Norton got married?
Yeah. No, he didn't own it. I asked him, I said, "Where's Norton?" He said, "That ain't got nothing to do with it. It's just them rocks." But it was a beautiful golf course. He would take us out there every year. every year.
Just for fun, or was there business meetings during
Well,
the morning?
for tax purposes, we did business. Hey, how you doing today? But took us out there for about 5 days. We played golf. We just hung out. And he loved to play poker with us. We could not afford to play big time poker because hell, we was all young, raising families. But he'd rather win 50 cents
Playing poker
off of one of us than he had make a barrel of money somewhere else. That just tickled the heck out of
He
him.
just loved to play poker.
But what kind of a guy was Mr. Campbell? He was as common as an old pair of gloves. A genuinely nice man that actually cared about his people, especially the ones that came up. He was a good guy, unpretentious, and didn't want to flaunt anything he had. But he did like Hickory Hills, which is where he was a member forever.
Good. So, during most of the time that Campbell 66 Express was in business, was Route 66 sort of like the meat and potatoes, the lifeline of
Yes, oh yes.
Chicago to Tulsa?
Chicago, during the first time, Chicago, St. Louis, Rolla, Lebanon, Springfield, Joplin, Pittsburgh, Parsons, Coffeyville, Tulsa. That was and then on the other side was Kansas City, which also fed all of those small towns. Chicago was the biggest terminal. St. Louis was second. Kansas City was third. And
But Springfield was always the headquarters.
Springfield was the headquarters and the relay point. There had a huge driver domicile here. Springfield furnished, like St. Louis, Chicago. You couldn't, back then, you couldn't do a turn that's St. Louis to Springfield and back legally in one night. Because it took longer than 10 hours because of the roads, and stuff like that. So a load to Tulsa, St. Louis, for example, St. Louis would run to Springfield. That driver would go to bed, be relieved. Another driver would take that truck on to Tulsa.
Yeah.
It was a system of relays. And Chicago to Springfield generally went to Lebanon. And the driver went to bed there, and then drivers would take it on to Joplin and Springfield.
So I don't even know how it works in the airline, but when you get on, they say, well, this crew is based out of Chicago, and you're in Denver, and I'm guessing that if you're a driver based out of one place and the end of your haul is another place, you spend a night in a hotel, or
Camel 66 and all carriers then that was called a through run. You went through to where you was going, and then the company had to furnish you either a domicile in the facility. We had several terminals that had domiciles in them, kind of like dormitory, or a hotel and transportation.
All right.
And then you had to be off at least 8 hours then, I believe, and a maximum of 15. I couldn't keep you longer than 15 hours without sending you somewhere else, and I had to send you home on your third dispatch.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
All right. So if you were a driver, you wanted 8 rather than 15. You want to turn around and get another load and be making money. Well, you got paid by the mile.
Yes, they all got paid by the mile. Now, Kansas City, was a good place to make runs because most everything in Kansas City at one time was a turn. Coffeyville, Springfield, Joplin, Pittsburgh, Lebanon.
Yeah.
All of these were turns. You just went there and back.
A turn was the same day.
You leave Kansas City, you go down there, you get your loads and come straight back. And then next night you do the same thing.
Yeah.
And that was good. Chicago was so far away, they didn't have too many turns because there wasn't much we did between Chicago and St. Louis.
Yeah.
We had authority down 66, but if I remember right, we didn't have authority to serve all them little towns.
So it was all like full loads.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, you leave Chicago, about the next best thing you could do is get to St. Louis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I don't understand is, so if I were a manufacturer or whatever, and I had a load I really wanted to get from point A to point B, you know, it might be lettuce, something perishable, it might be something frozen, it might be something that just, I needed to get it to this other place. They couldn't pay you more than hauling the proverbial Van Camp's pork and beans.
Actually, unless we had a specific exception rate published in the tariff,
So you could ask for exceptions.
you couldn't pay me more.
Really?
You couldn't pay me less. You had to pay me this much. Now, how I got the freight instead of somebody else was I would do what you had to have done.
Service.
That was all it was about.
Yeah. If you got a reputation of being, they'll get it to you by midnight on the Friday.
That's right. You got to have it. We'll get it done.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't pay me any extra.
Yeah.
There was a provision. There was a provision called, in most of the tariffs, called exclusive use of trailer. In other words, if you had 3,000 pounds and you had to have it point A to point B, you could buy that whole trailer, just like chartering an airliner.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
You know, they charter a 747 for 90 people.
You got it. You got one
sports.
pallet on there, that's your business, but you got
Yeah,
the whole thing.
in other words, you pay me from point A to point B in a certain length of time. What you put on it, I could care less.
No other stops. We're taking your load.
Straight through.
We're taking your load.
And that's it. That's all it
for the whole
and
trailer.
it's sealed. Here's the seal number, and that was that was about the only thing you could do.
Yeah, all right. Dumb question, but I never knew this. So if I'm a driver and I'm driving a load from Kansas City to Pittsburgh, Kansas, typically would you basically unhitch that trailer and move your tractor to pick up another load on it? So it wasn't like you'd wait for it to get unloaded and reloaded.
No.
You would just like, here it is.
Yeah.
I don't care.
The
It's
road
here.
drivers, there was called road drivers and city drivers. The road and never the twain shall meet.
Really?
The road drivers drove from Kansas City to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
If the terminal was dark, aka closed at midnight,
Yeah.
you dropped your trailer, you looked at your list, and there's what I'm supposed to pick up. You picked that trailer up and left.
Oh, really?
Now, even if
Kind of self-serve for the driver just did it.
and if you were there in the daytime and the terminal was open, they would have somebody there called a hostler that worked in the lot that would generally drop your trailer and hook you up to your other one.
Yeah. All right.
But if it was dark, you just did your own thing.
It was almost like a pit stop. You know, you want to get that done as quickly as possible.
Yeah, because he gets paid by the mile.
Yeah.
If he's sitting there,
Want to get back on the road. Yeah.
you know, if the wheels ain't turning, he's not earning. That's what they used to say.
Having said that, though, that another thing I've heard or read was that Campbell 66 Express was a stickler for safety.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Complete safety.
Point of pride for Frank and everybody
Yeah,
else.
that was the thing of pride. And there's a section when you get in this devoted completely to safety. You know, what good are we to you if your freight's piled up under a bridge or burnt up or tore up?
Yeah.
Safety, safety was so important, we put it in our marketing brochure. And there's a section here devoted to it.
Was there a standard industry? Would it be like, you know, so many miles, so many miles per
Yes.
accident, or,
Yes. And you know what? I cannot answer that. Oh, here, yes I can. Camel 66 road drivers average 2.270 accidents per 100,000 miles compared to a national average of 12.1. So yeah, we did keep that. At 84 to now, I could not remember those numbers, but it was important enough, and there's all the stuff. 3-year accident frequency.
All right. So it was kind of.
It was very important.
But Campbell 66
and important enough to us. We wanted our customers to know about it.
Yeah. Prided.
Wait a minute.
For the long haul truckers, did you usually have teams?
Yes, your long haulers back then were PIE, DC, Denver, Chicago, Consolidated Freightways, CF, Roadway, Leeway. That was your big long haulers. And yes, they a lot of them, matter of fact, most of them on your, for example, Kansas City to Seattle teams. And there was a lot of interlining done back then. Now what that means is we didn't go to Los Angeles. I don't know if anybody is old enough to remember Rocketdyne in Neosho, Missouri. North American Aviation, they made the engines for the rockets, the Saturns and the Atlas and all
Gemini.
That was North American Aviation's rocket engine place.
Yeah.
So what happens? Their other facility was Canoga Park, California. We didn't go to Canoga Park.
Yeah.
We did go to Neosho. Transcon went to Canoga Park, but they didn't go to Neosho. So we got with the shipper and worked out a deal. Transcon would give us a trailer in Tulsa. We'd bring it to Joplin, take it to Neosho, load one rocket engine on it, seal it, take it to Tulsa, give it back to Transcon. They'd put a sleeper team in it and take it straight to Canoga Park.
Yeah.
So yes, the long haulers, and that was just one example, the long haulers mostly used sleepers.
Yeah. But Campbell didn't use?
I don't remember, I don't think we ever had a sleeper.
Really? And did you ever have teams, or was it mainly just one driver?
Camel 66 Express was all relay.
Yeah. And that was one of the innovations, was you didn't have one big massive facility. No. You had terminals dotted all over.
Yes, and you'll see them right here. We felt like that was important enough to make it a part.
And that was innovative and kind of a business
strategy.
strategy.
It was called, they were called brake bulks. Here, just a second. Look, I want you to see that. That's very important. There we go, 5. You know, I wished I could remember the order of which what you're talking about right here. Instead of all the freight conglomerating in one spot, those red circles were the cities where your major brake bulk hubs were. Can you see them on that?
Yep, I got it.
And you'll be able to digitize them. But that's a good point. There was basically 5 of them. Instead of all being one place, like FedEx is great, but if you ship a shipment from here to Dallas, I think it's going to go to Memphis first.
Yeah.
Well, that's great if you're at 650 miles an hour.
Yeah.
That's not great at 65.
So it's kind of a basic logistics kind of thing.
And this didn't happen in the 80s. This happened a long time before that.
Was that Frank's idea?
Yeah. Memphis, Indianapolis, Springfield, Chicago. Those are the biggies.
Yeah.
And that was, instead of one hub, there's 5.
Yeah.
And that, every time we pick up a shipment from you, we take it and deliver it. Every time we handle that shipment of yours, it slows it down. We run a risk of damaging it. Mm-hmm. We get paid to pick it up and deliver it. Mr. Campbell told me this: what we do with it in the middle determines our profit. You get paid to pick it up and deliver it. Mm-hmm. Now, if you want to handle it 6 or 7 times, you're probably not going to make any money.
Yeah.
If you pick it up and one day and deliver it the next, you got a chance of making $1.
Yeah. Now, were fuel prices regulated?
Not that I know of.
So fuel would go up and down. Maybe
fuel just went up.
Maybe not as much as it does.
Most of our terminals, I'd say 90% of them had tanks.
Yeah. You'd buy
in bulk.
Yeah.
And diesel. I remember one load of diesel we got. Of course, we didn't pay tax at the time of the delivery of diesel. We paid fuel tax to the states. Mm-hmm. But that's another issue. Was 9.8 cents per gallon. That was in Kansas City in 1966. Wow. I saw the ticket.
Wow. 9.8 cents per
Now,
gallon.
we had to pay fuel, sales and fuel tax on top of that, but the cost of the diesel was under a dime.
Yeah. Now, I know this is a different time, but did you have any women drivers?
Yeah, one out of Chicago.
One?
And that was up in the 70s. Uh-huh. But back then, in the 60s when I started, we did not have any.
No.
The trucks weren't even air conditioned.
Yeah.
They really weren't. And this will make some people fall out of their chair. No power steering, no air conditioning.
Were they manual shift?
Yes, sir.
Whoa.
10-speed Road Rangers.
Whoa. Radios? I mean, what would a driver do when he was driving? I mean, he would sing to himself or...
Hummed, chain smoked Lucky Strikes.
No filters.
No muffler. Then the CB came along.
When did the CB come on?
I think it came on in the late 60s, early 70s.
All right, because when I was in high school, I graduated from high school.
And then, that, to me, a lot of people cuss it, but one of the things I think the CBs were great for, it eliminated the driver's boredom. Mm-hmm. I think that was the number one driver problem back then, was boredom. You had no radio, you had no CB, you had no satellite, you had no nothing.
You had no communication.
You had no air conditioning, you had no power steering.
Yeah.
You could, I think eventually you could go stark raving.
Yeah. This has nothing to do with the history of Campbell 66 Express, but I'm sensing that self-driving trucks are probably going to happen in my lifetime. Yeah.
Probably not mine, but probably yours.
What do you think of that?
Being old-fashioned, I don't think much of it. Because I know I've been around drivers so much, and I know what good that they do. I mean, yeah, there's some bad eggs. There's bad eggs in everything. Right. But drivers have saved so many lives on the road, and drivers preventing accidents. Yeah, trucks get a bad rap, but you'd be amazed if you're caught in a car and it's threatening to burn and you're in a wreck. Had you rather have a truck with no driver come by, or a truck with a driver that gives a darn and tries to get you out come by?
Yeah.
I think we're losing something.
Well, that's a good point. And I've also heard that, I mean, Yeah, they didn't have that communication. They didn't have the GPS. You know, they didn't know at all times where the truck was, where it was, whether it was moving or not, what speed it was moving. But if you broke down,
Yes.
somebody was going to stop and help you.
When I was a young kid, if my mother and I went somewhere, my father would always tell us, and we'd generally be going to Tulsa or Oak City, follow a truck, and if you break down, flag down a trucker, and if you're going to get something to eat, go to a truck stop. And that's the way it was back then.
Yeah.
With driverless trucks, what do you got?
Yeah.
You know, even with all the automation, I'm a commercial pilot. I got a multi-engine rating from the government, the whole mess. These pilots today, they got everything in there. The plane will land itself in 0-0, called Category 3, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
But they can't get from here to Tulsa with dead reckoning. Isn't that going to come back and bite us someday?
Yeah.
And when we do that in airplanes, and then we do it in trucks,
Yeah.
I don't know.
When you got your memory in your pocket.
Yeah, I remember watching, my first time I ever saw a robot was Robbie the Robot in the 1950s in the movies, you know, that he was on Lost in Space, you know, later. I thought that was amazing. Now, Robbie's a toy.
Yeah.
I mean, and progress is good,
Yeah.
but driverless trucks, I think, not too good, just like driverless cars.
Yeah. Truck stops. Did Campbell's have agreements with certain truck stops, or?
Some of them, yes, sir. Kansas City to Dallas, we got discounts if we had to buy fuel or have work done at Big Cabin, Oklahoma, there
Yeah,
on 69 highway.
Yeah.
St. Chicago to St. Louis. There's a place halfway between Springfield or St. Louis and Chicago. It's on 66, and I forget the name of the truck stop.
Oh, McLean's?
McLean.
Yeah.
They've still got Route 66 memorabilia in
Yeah.
there, and there's pictures of some Camel 66 trucks.
Yeah, they claim they're the oldest continuously operating truck stop.
They may well be, but we had discounts there.
Yeah.
You know, we had various discounts.
Get it all worked out, you know.
Yeah,
You're going to get so many miles per gallon.
Yeah,
in this
and
driverless
generally you
truck.
didn't need to, but sometimes something would come up, and an emergency road repair.
Yeah.
We had a deal at the truck stop at Marked Tree, Arkansas, on the way to Memphis. But we didn't own any, but we
Just had agreements.
had agreements with them.
Yeah. Would they be like contracts written out?
I mean, yeah, back then, and a lot of them were verbal. And you asked me a while ago about Mr. Campbell, what kind of a guy he was. He believed your word was your bond.
If he gave his word.
If you shook hands, he told me one time, he said, I don't worry about people signing anything. If a man's word's no good, his signature isn't much better. I mean, that not to regress, but that's the kind of guy he was.
Yeah.
Shake hands, meeting's adjourned.
Yeah. He'll do everything he can to.
You shake
Stand by
hands
his
and give a
word.
man your word,
Yeah.
it's over.
Yeah. So I want to thank you for taking time.
Oh,
for,
my pleasure. You'll have a jillion more questions. We
I'll be in.
We may want to do this again after you get this digitized and have somebody actually look at it.
Yeah, like I said, we're just getting started. You know, this is just the start of the first phase of a
Well, I'll be happy to help you in any way I can.
long-standing project. So,
And if I find some more stuff,
right.
really, I'm very proud of this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of the time I spent at Camel 66. They were good to me.
Yeah.
I ended up as vice president of a major carrier after Camel, but there'll always be a spot in my heart for Camel 66.
Yeah. So in Campbell, what was sort of the last phase of your career? Where did you go from?
I left a year and 4 days before they left the world.
Yeah. You just had an opportunity, or you
I had an opportunity,
saw the writing on the wall,
and I just didn't feel comfortable anymore.
Yeah.
And I went to work for American Freightways in Harrison, Arkansas, and then we were bought by FedEx. And then after that, in 91 or 2, I started this. And
so you started Nixa Trucking.
my son, I don't even work any. I work about 3 or 4 hours a week for my son, you know, a cigarette and beer money, and I don't smoke. okay. But yeah, he was in on it from the start.
Okay. So
and then I retired in 2013. And after I retired, they quadrupled their business and built this and bought all this land. So getting rid of me was the best thing that happened to them. So I work about 3 to 5 hours a week, just odds and ends, you know, balancing the checkbook. And
yeah. You like to play golf?
I belong at Millwood, yes, sir.
All right. Well, thanks very much. It's been great, and I will have these digitized and bring back the originals. And
please, anything I can help you with about Camel, like, you know, it's like, what kind of a guy was Frank? You know, a handshake was it.
Yeah.
All this stuff will come back to me as you jog my memory.
How many employees did it have? Yeah, well, good for you. You look good for 75.
Well, you ought to be on this side looking out.
What in terms of number of employees, where did Campbell 66 Express peak? How many employees did they have?
1,800. It's 1,800. It's in here.
All full time, or you know, did you do part?
I never worked part time. I started out 40 hours a week.
I mean, Frank believed in your full time or your no time.
Yeah, and he liked me, and I guess I gave a damn. Excuse my French. I wanted to learn.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can type 80 words a minute.
Yeah.
What does that prove?
Yeah.
I want to know what I'm typing.
Yeah.
What does it mean? What's a shipper? What's a consignee?
Yeah.
What's a tariff?
So you were trying to understand the whole business operation.
That's why Mr. Camel promoted most of his salespeople from operations. He said, it's like trying to sell a watch if you don't know how it works. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have any, you know, I ask you for 500 pounds going to Dallas, you give it to me. He used to say, what are you going to do if he asks you what you're going to do with it? How does it get there?
Yeah.
Walk?
Yeah.
God miracles it down there?
Yeah.
Product knowledge. So most of his marketing people came out of operations.
Yeah. Here's one last question, and you know, it's a pretty vague question, but you know, when you consider the whole operation, what were either the major threats or you know the major sticking points? Was it? I was talking to a guy who owned a truck line once, and he said, you know, the hardest thing is retaining good drivers.
Oh, nowadays, that's okay. No, let's do some history. That's the difference. Right now, the industry average is 103%. If you have 100 drivers January 1st, and you still have 100 drivers December 31st, you're going to cycle 103 drivers through it to keep them.
Yeah.
You've got your basic core of your top 15% of your drivers.
Mm-hmm. Reliable.
The rest of them turnover weekly.
Was that the way it was back in the 60s?
No.
Oh.
A truck driver for a major company, Camel 66, you were well respected in town.
It was a career.
We had a waiting list.
Really?
At Camel 66, yes, and it was called a casual board. Casual. If all of your drivers were used up and gone, you had a list of people wanting jobs.
Yeah.
And that list was generally long, and you could use them, they were called casual. That's part-time drivers.
Yeah.
That you only...
Almost like a substitute teacher in a school.
Yes,
or something.
yes.
Yeah.
You're out of drivers, you got that load we talked about has to be there, you put this guy on it.
Yeah.
Your casual list was generally as long as your seniority list.
Yeah.
You had
And that was kind of a way in, if you did casual work.
Yes,
then
that was the only way in.
Prove you had some, you could
Prove
do the
you
work
could
and-
do it.
Yeah.
But there was no turnover. Absolutely, positively, none.
Really. Unless you got sick or died.
You died. Sick didn't count. But no, I mean, Camel 66 had people that worked there 40 years, 50 years.
Yeah.
They didn't go anywhere.
Yeah. Different today.
Now, drivers change companies about as often as they change socks.
Yeah.
And we got some guys here that have been with us since we started.
Yeah.
And we got some guys that have been with us 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But as a rule, the last time I looked, it was 103%.
Wow.
That's the last time I looked.
So more than 100% turnover.
Yeah.
every-
Now my son can tell you more, but he, I don't. It's hard for me to look that up on the golf course.
I heard another person told me that he'd worked for UPS, and he said, talking about this, he said, there are some drivers for UPS that when the going gets tough, it's hot or cold or whatever, they will just walk away from the truck.
Yes.
Just, I'm not taking this anymore, and they'll pull off to the side.
Yeah.
They might turn the blinkers on, and they might not, and
That's
they'll
right.
walk away.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of that, and truckers like us, we've had truckers just get pissed off, or get very unhappy, park it, pull the keys out, and catch a Greyhound.
Yeah. Now I should ask you, Nixa Trucking. What kind of trucking do you all do?
We're 100% dry freight, no reefers, no flatbeds.
Yes.
We do specific thing. We're primarily a JIT, just in time. 80% of our business is dedicated. Same thing every day. Same thing
just same
every day.
routes.
And we don't. Mr. Campbell taught me years ago. There's only one thing in this business you can't do. You can't be all things to all people all the time. You got to be something to somebody special. Mm-hmm. What we do, we don't make bones about it. We do business with 2 of the top 5 companies in the world, dedicated, and we're not. My philosophy is I hate grocery house freight. I always said, and Mr. Campbell taught me so much. He told me once, if you can eat it or wear it, don't pick it up. That was a direct.
It's gonna be more headache than profit.
That's it.
Basically.
And it's gonna be more grief. He said, like he said one time, he said, I got more money than I got time to spend it, so I don't need no grief. he said
So
that.
you would pass on load. I mean, just because somebody needed to move something from point A to point B doesn't mean you're gonna say
We
well,
passed
we'll do it.
on freight. Yes, we did.
Yeah.
We certainly did. Not a whole lot, but we tried to specialize in what we did. Just like, and I'd like to tell you, this is all my idea. I picked it up from other people.
Yeah.
I'd like to tell you, I was bright enough to think of all this. I wasn't. I learned. I was
listen.
smart enough to listen.
Listen and learn.
Mr. Campbell told me one time, he said, the only thing in the world that's free is paying attention. You know what? He was right.
Yeah. I should ask you this because so if 66 was sort of your main run,
Yes.
it was 2-lane most of the.
Yes.
Was getting roads upgraded. Whether it's 4-lane or wider or heavier loads or the bridges being better. Was that a major?
Major. What that did at Camel 66, the better roads, the better equipment, and the better bridges and stuff like that, it let you make a 500-mile run.
Yeah.
You couldn't do that.
Yeah.
When 69 highway was 2-lane, you couldn't make it.
Right.
You had to go from Kansas City to Tulsa, Oak City, and relay it.
When 66 went through the
Was
square
2
in
lanes.
downtown
You
Springfield.
could barely make it.
Yeah.
From Chicago to St. Louis in 10 hours.
Yeah.
You could not go to Springfield and back.
Because every town you were going through, you had to slow
You
down
went,
and stop.
Yeah, and you couldn't, let me tell you something, you couldn't even make Joplin, Missouri to Wichita, Kansas straight through, because that 54 highway went around hog pens and chicken houses and stuff like that. But it just made so much of a difference.
Yeah.
When you could get in a truck and go 500 miles.
So as a company, you were really pushing for the limited access, divided highways.
Oh yes. The less cars you see, the better off you are.
Yeah. Now I don't want to put you on the spot, but weigh stations.
Weight stations?
Were they
Oh, yeah,
feared, or are we always
and-
trying to push the limit a little bit?
And they've always been there. Back then, they were a division of, before 1980, the weight stations, they used to be called ports of entry, because that's what they were. And they were controlled by the ICC, the Interstate Commerce Commission. Kansas, you had to stop, like going from here to Baxter Springs, you had to stop at the port of entry there at Galena, Kansas. And you had to show them your paperwork that you had authority to go into Kansas, and if you didn't, you paid a trip permit. And that's mostly what they did. They only weighed trucks. They were interested in legality. They only weighed trucks if they thought they had a reason.
Oh, really? So they were just,
That they were mostly they were actually ports of entry.
Yeah.
And then the scale houses, the truckers brought it on themselves, started putting, instead of 46,000, 64,000 on a truck when the engines got better. And then the boys said, well, we better start weighing them all. And the truckers brought it on themselves.
The trucking company.
Yeah. The only reason the states weigh trucks and write tickets is because they have a reason to.
Yeah.
Now, the reason is we gave to
Yeah. But that's, when you've got regulated freight tariffs.
them. Back then, it wasn't much. Yeah.
If you can haul more lucrative run for you.
But back then, the tariffs were constructed where a trucker with 2 brain cells to rub together could turn 5 cents on the dollar profit. I mean, if you just ran from here to there and
5%
didn't even know how to get there,
Yeah.
you could generally operate in the high 90s.
Yeah.
Take in 100 pennies and spend 98 to 95 cents to do it.
Yeah.
So overloading then wasn't much of an advantage.
Yeah.
And the trucks back then, a lot of times they didn't have 600 horse like they do today. You put 60,000 on one in 1963, it wouldn't pull it.
Yeah. I promise this is the last question. I've said the last question now for 3 times. But
I'm retired.
And I'll be back. That's right. I'd heard that Campbell 66 Express did innovative doors. The doors on the back of a truck that we now take for granted was a Campbell 66 Express.
Overhead.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was, think about it, you're a city driver, and a lot of shipments are delivered on the trailer that the road driver brings it in on.
Yep.
You got 10 stops to make. You got to swing those doors open and
You got to
hook 'em.
stop, get out,
Twice.
back up. Yeah.
Overhead door, click, by,
You back all the way up,
gone.
lift the door, unload.
Gone. I mean, it's the greatest thing.
Yeah.
We had some innovations that didn't work.
Yeah.
The Camel Pouch, like I told you.
Yeah.
We had hydraulic dollies. instead of the crank dollies. We had hydraulics.
When did motorized?
They were great, other than the fact they didn't work when it was cold.
When did motorized forklifts come into?
With Moses, I think. I don't, and I know everything had a motor on it in '63.
Now it's been a while since I've tangentially involved in trucking. I don't know how they load a truck now, but it used to be in the '80s when I was
Yellow Freight in Tulsa, Oklahoma. No CF in Tulsa, Oklahoma, because my uncle worked there. We would go down there and see him sometimes. They was motorized. They had motorized forklifts in '48.
Oh, okay. So, but I remember that a lot of times to load a truck, it'd be palletized, standard size pallet. You can come at it either way, And
that's called a four-way.
A four-way, and shrink wrapped. A lot of times, and all that. And the pallet,
it's called a pallet jack.
The forklift operator would run the forklift right into the trailer. It just, whatever it is, 12 pallets or whatever fits in. And you load that thing in 10 minutes.
Yeah. You were talking about how much freight was hand freight back when I started, and I said 60 to 80%. I'd say
that changed pretty quickly.
I would say nowadays, work comp. You don't get many work comp claims off of
operating a forklift.
There are carriers now that won't accept freight if it's not palletized. You can get 40 by 48. You can turn them either way.
Yep.
And I think you can get 26 on
26
if you turn them right on a trailer nowadays. But in small places, they've got pallet jacks.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. Did a lot of that.
Yeah, they work, but that's the difference. You mentioned it earlier. Used to it took a guy to unload it, a dock man to wheel it, and a guy to reload it. Now it takes one guy and a Yale forklift. Gone.
Yep.
That's
real
the difference.
Fast. Yeah, real fast.
That's the difference. Called breaking a trailer, unloading a trailer, and getting it to where the pieces are supposed to be. Used to be half a night experience.
Yeah.
Now it's 2 hours at the most.
Yeah. Now here's another question I always wondered about. So they have this acronym FOB, freight on board.
Freight on board. That's prepaid and collect.
All right.
If
so you're driving, you pull up to the dock. I'm talking about liability issues. So while they're unloading, I was once unloading a pallet full of 5-gallon buckets of pickles. And the load shifted and all these pickles went spilling all over the place. Who's as we were unloading the truck? Who's responsible
as
for
you were unloading it?
Yeah.
Boy, that's touchy.
When does the liability shift, I guess, between the receiving entity and the shipping entity?
Once I sign as a carrier, and this hasn't changed, once I sign that bill of lading, it's mine. I'm the carrier.
Campbell 66 is responsible for that.
I own it.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
I'm required, and the law was I'm required to deliver that intact and complete, or make you whole.
Yeah.
I sign for 10 boxes. I deliver 9. I'm on the hook for 1. But if I'm into the dock, and you are unloading it and you work for the consignee.
The consignee.
I'm going to say, whoops.
Who's ever operating the forklift.
Whoever's operating it. If my man's operating it, that's why you have general liability in this industry. That's in case my driver's operating that forklift for you and hurts somebody.
Yeah.
Or hit somebody in the head with a crowbar.
Yeah.
But if you're operating the forklift and it's on my truck and I have presented it in order, and you damage it, you did it.
Yeah. Now there was a terrible accident up by Conway. Was that last weekend with that ice storm?
Oh.
A lot of trucks. I've heard for decades that if a trucker You know, here's just an example. You know, if a van full of a family of 10 does something stupid, or the driver falls asleep or something, and the trucker will try to avoid hitting that van, even if it means I'm going to ruin the load. You know.
Yeah.
I'm going to go down and the load's going to land in this riverbed. You know.
Actually,
the driver's the sort of the mentality and morality of the driver is, even if I feel like I'm going to give up my life or put my life in danger to avoid hitting a passenger vehicle.
Yeah, they don't want to do that.
I'm going to do that.
That's something that drivers have gone insane over, is killing people.
Yeah.
Even though it was not their fault.
Yeah.
We had a guy commit suicide out by Terre Haute, Indiana. He stood beside of the road and jumped out in front of one of our trucks and had the suicide note in his pocket.
Oh, non-driver, just
a guy out off of the street.
He just
wanted to kill himself.
Wanted to end it all. Yeah.
Our driver lost his doochies.
His what?
He lost his marbles.
Oh, his marbles.
He ended up having to be committed for a while.
He felt so bad that he'd taken his life.
I mean, yes, they want to hit anything other than people. Bridges, telephone poles, they'll hit anything other than people, and particularly young ones. Yeah. That makes them crazy. Yeah. They don't want to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, they care, but that would be a hit.
Is that why a lot of drivers like to run at night? Is because just lower traffic?
Drivers all have one thing in common. They all have bad backs. They all have child support payments, and they all like to run at night. That's exactly.
But that's why, because less traffic.
The less, they call them four-wheelers. The less four-wheelers, the better their life is.
Even though I'm guessing that the chances of running into an inebriated four-wheeler is higher at 2 a.m. than at 2 p.m.
Yes, very much so. That's why they all hate to run New Year's Eve. Yeah. They call it amateur night. They say the most dangerous time is 3 o'clock New Year's Day, 3 a.m. Most dangerous time of the year. Yeah. They don't like to run there, and they don't like to drive 4 hours after the Super Bowl's over. Because there's just drunks all over the place.
Too much, yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you're going across I-80 and you're near Resume Speed, Nebraska, that's not much of an issue. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or Jesus Junction, Utah.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, thanks very much. This is very helpful, and I'll be in touch.